Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. This is a much, in a sense, in anticipation episode. We are going to record a show today on Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud. He's going to take over as the Chief Justice of India on November 9th, 2022 with a 2-year tenure. We're all looking forward to it. And to discuss his tenure, the kind of expectations that he has raised, and also talking about him and his judgments, his career, and other things. I have with me a very eminent panel. May I welcome first Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi. He's eminent jurist, senior advocate, third-time sitting member of Parliament. He, as we all know, is currently heading the Parliamentary Standing Committee for the Ministry of Commerce, earlier for the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Ministry of Law. He's also served as the Additional Solicitor General of India, and he is also thankfully a regular feature on Legally Speaking with Tarun Nangia. Good to see you, Dr. Singhvi. He joins us from the city of Bangalore today, and as usual, looking forward to some very interesting anecdotes from you, because during our research, we found out that you went to the same school, or rather the same class as Justice Chandrachud. So I don't know if you would reveal much, but I would still request. I have with me senior advocate Amit Desai, one of the top counsels of India from the city of Mumbai. He joins me from the city of Mumbai. He appears in the Bombay High Court and the Supreme Court. One of the top criminal lawyers also in his category. Good to see you, Mr. Desai, and looking forward to some interesting anecdotes from you too. I have with me Advocate Rohan Shah, one of India's top counsels on the tax side, and fine business mind too. Good to see you, Mr. Shah. He joins me from the city of Mumbai today, appears in the Bombay High Court and the Supreme Court of India and other tax tribunals. Good to see you, Mr. Shah. I have with me, in a sense, I would tell it as a joke that the government of India is on a mission, to, in a sense, get youngsters jobs. And Mohit has been on that mission. He started a law firm called Saraf and Partners and employed 200 lawyers. I think this is the fastest to have hired. Good to see you, Mr. Mohit Saraf, and Godspeed to your endeavor to hire more lawyers. And this emerged as the fastest growing firm in the recent times. Looking forward to some interesting anecdotes from you too. I'll go to Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi at the outset, and I'll also request other panelists to mute when he's speaking so there's no acoustic issue later. Dr. Singhvi, in the first 3 minutes, if you could lay the ground, and then we move ahead.
Well, it's always dangerous to raise expectations so much. And a person like the incoming Chief Justice legitimately raises expectations a lot. Because first and foremost, this word intellectual has acquired a negative connotation. But according to me, in certain vocations, including judging, this person has remarkable intellectual heft. In fact, of the recent past, I would, it's invidious to take names, but single out Justice Nariman and Justice Chandrachud. And I think when you bring to this office intellectual heft, it adds a lot. It is not something you can take for granted. It may not be such a great word outside of judging. It sometimes is a dirty word, but according to me, it has a lot of positive connotations, and every positive connotation of the word is exhibited by Justice Chandrachud. Secondly, and I say this, as you say, from some of the researches which you have unearthed, not only there, but in the next level college as well. He's an outstanding scholar. And he's a thinker, a researcher, writes very well. Now, these are skill sets which we tend to take for granted or expect for granted and frequently fail to find in various levels of the judiciary. So I think for a person to be leading the whole system with these skill sets is a great plus. More importantly, and thirdly, Tarun, I believe that, and I've been watching this for the last couple of years in particular, but even before that, I think he has a sense of history, a sense of legacy. He wants to leave a mark which has a longer term continuity. For example, he wants to be seen as standing up for progressive values. For example, he wants to be seen as standing up for liberal values. For example, he wants to be seen as standing up for freedom issues. That is clearly discernible from a whole trend of his judgments. Fourthly, and I'm sure we'll be discussing these points, so I'll be very brief. You probably have a Dhananjay Chandrachud, but equally a digital Chandrachud coming up. So, you have a DC which is going to be clearly, and he has indicated that in all his actions in the past few years. In fact, the other day, we are appearing, I'm the lead counsel at a constitution bench. So he, as his usual diplomatic manner, put across a rule that nobody appears before him in a constitution bench, including senior counsel, with only a iPad and a laptop and no paper. It will be a paperless constitution bench argument. And we all joked. I joked with him. I said, you want to teach old horses new tricks. And then he deputed one of the registrars, senior registrars technical, to train the few of us who were appearing in that matter, and so on and so forth. Otherwise also, he's headed that committee. He's done a lot, and I think you'll find great strides in that area. So in the end, I will say that there is dynamism, there is leadership. And I've always said, I said in your program many years ago, and I want to repeat it, it's not happened. I hope he takes that, what I've talked about many times, that people in the judiciary, there's no reason why you should not have a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan. There must be a continuity. There must be a common minimum program. I am there, the next is you, then third is Mr. Desai, the fourth is Rohan Shah. You can have lots of differences, but there is no reason why you cannot have a CMP and decide that those 3 or 5 or 10 points, you sit together and you hand over the baton, and that consistency will have a synergy which will be exemplary. I think that is something which I would want very much the incoming Chief Justice to start and, connect those who are following him in that chair 3, 2, 4, 5 times ahead.
Thanks for that opening comment where you spoke about him as a person, but also shared with us the expectations that you have of him on the administrative side, also on the e-courts and the digital appearances front. I'll go to Senior Advocate Amit Desai for his opening comment on Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud.
So I think all of us here, and Manu has really lucidly articulated what the Chief Justice stands for, Dhananjay, as we know. And in fact, I must say in Bombay, when we all grew up together, he was obviously fondly known as Dhan or Danny. And of course, he now stands in this position. But, I think we've all seen, and I think and in particular, if I can tell you from my experiences and knowing him from the time when he started off his practice in Bombay, his aspirations were very clearly set. And he was focused and determined to try and give back to society. And the best way for him to do that was through the process of judging. As Manu rightly said, he has a desire to set out a legacy. But I think it's not just a legacy for himself. I think he uses his position to create a legacy for the judiciary. He uses his position to create a legacy for the country. And therefore, when you see through a lot of his decisions and rulings, as Manu rightly pointed out, what he's doing is shaping a society around his philosophy, around his value systems, whether it's progressive values, whether it's liberalism. He uses the instrument of law to convert morality into a legal concept. And he wants society to sort of evolve and work within those frameworks. He has a visionary mindset. His intellect enables him to actually look far ahead of what the country actually has. And in some ways, when you really look at the Chandrachuds, if I may use that term, between father and son, I mean, they would at the end of their period have 21 years of judging and setting the tone. And in many ways, when you look at the philosophy amongst the family, you see the similarities between the father and the son in many ways. And so when he goes there, and we've all been sort of in many ways watching this movement of his from early 2000 when he became a judge of the Bombay High Court, and then his elevation through the system all the way into the Supreme Court, we've all, as those who've known him and watched him, have waited in anticipation in some ways for this moment, because he's got the next 2 years to now set the vision, set the tone of his values that he has believed in, many of which you see sprinkled through all his judgments. In fact, he's a prolific judgment writer, as we know, as Manu has said, a great researcher, a great intellect, and has probably sat on most of the constitution benches, or the maximum number of constitution benches a single judge would have sat on. So he uses that as an opportunity to actually set the field, set the trend. And I mean, just to think about it, that, it's destiny for him that he happens to be the 50th Chief Justice, so in that sense, a golden jubilee, in the 75th year of independence. And I mean, in some ways, it's like the stars coming together for him to lay the foundation for this nation in many ways that we see. So all these values that we've seen through his judgment, I hope and pray that you see more of that in the next few years in his tenure as the Chief Justice.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that opening comment. I'll go across to Advocate Rohan Shah. If you'd also share your opinions on the digitalization of courts, because a lot of commercial matters day in and day out, clients also wants to log in, but that's after your opening comment.
Thank you, Tarun. Just to share a few anecdotes of my own. When I entered the bar, 87, 88, Justice Chandrachud was already the Lone Star. Everybody said that this is the person you must emulate and this is the person you must follow. And living in very close vicinity to where he is in Kafpare, the one thing which was absolutely certain every morning is that 4 a.m. his light would go on and he would be at his desk. And I think in a small way, that was just such a tremendous inspiration in terms of the work ethic that it takes to, be proficient in the law. And I think that entire work ethic is what is culminated into Justice Chandrachud as we know today, right? The other thing which the other speakers have also commented on, but which I think is critical, is that I think he's the judge of this time, because not only is there an outstanding intellect, there is a deep understanding of commercial issues, there is a deep understanding of technology, and he is truly someone who also sensitively understands the various facets of social life and social dilemma. And you see that literally, on a daily basis, his demeanor in court, his ability to write the judgments that he does. And, I do know from listening to him that one of his great heroines is really Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was one of the great judges of the US Supreme Court, but was a fierce and still very consensus-building judge on issues of, gender equality, civil rights, liberties. And I think, Justice Chandrachud brings together the best of all of that. And even today, it's such a pleasure to appear before him. For most lawyers, unlike, let's say, Mr. Desai or Dr. Singhvi, coming to the Supreme Court is a pretty daunting proposition, right? And to have a judge who remembers by name almost 90% of the counsel who appear before him, could be seniors, could be juniors, could be state counsel, could be counsel visiting from outside. It is such a humanitarian gesture for him to mention those counsel by name. And you can immediately palpably see the tension dissipate. And, people begin to address the court in a little more relaxed manner. So I think, lots of expectations, but to me, Justice Chandrachud is destiny's child. He's come at a critical phase of our nation, history and its future. And I think there couldn't be a better person.
Thank you for sharing that opening comment. I've also shared a short anecdote. Recently, somebody mentioned that how can somebody be the Chief Justice of India at age 50? They're attributing, he looks only 50, though he's about, I would tell his age, but everybody knows that he's well into his 60s, but he looks so younger than his age. Also known as a very fitness freak is what people who know him say, that he's too much into fitness and also his dad, but that's an anecdote for another day now. I'll go across to Mr. Mohit Saraf for his opening comment on Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud.
I think, thank you, Tarun. Let me give you corporate India perspective. Or corporate India, and I work a lot with corporate India on deals and then on litigation arbitration. And therefore, let me tell you what the corporate India expect, both the Indian companies and foreign MNCs. I would say today, if you look at it, is on the ease of doing business, we have significantly improved in the last 5-6 years. But on enforceability of contract, we are still bottom 20. We are 163 out of 180. And as Dr. Singhvi said, he is a person who wants to leave a legacy. So I thought I'll maybe use this opportunity to put across what the corporate India expect. Right now, I think our GDP is $2.8 trillion. And 4-5 days back, an IMF came up with a report we're expecting the GDP to move to $5 trillion by 2026-27. We can argue whether it's 26-27 or 27-28 or 28-29, but we are certainly going there. And I think the IMF also expect the GDP to be $10 trillion by 2030-33. I'm not talking about the years, but I'm talking about where we are going. So you are really talking about additional of $7.2 trillion in next 10, 12 years of GDP. And it is a proven fact that today, if you have to add a $1 of GDP, you need to put 55 cents of investment. Okay. So basically, we are talking about in the next 10, 12 years, we are expecting $7.8 trillion to be added to GDP. And therefore, the investment of $3.6 trillion. Now imagine what we are today. We are a very small economy, $2.8 trillion and $10 trillion in 10, 12 years. Think about is how many Dr. Singhvi would require to handle that level of dispute. When the GDP goes double, the disputes, the corporate disputes, the M&A transaction, the private equity transaction goes 4 times. So we are talking about in next 12 years, the GDP going 4 times. And therefore, the litigation at Supreme Court, the High Court, the tribunals going 12 times. So you can imagine how many Dr. Singhvi would require. And therefore, what we really require is improvement of enforceability of contract. I would say that's the most important part. And that is, I believe, can be the biggest thing. Because really, I've looked at a lot of his judgments and he has his heart at the right place. He always thinks about how the common man will benefit. But if the investment comes, that's the only way India per capita will move from $2,500 to $6,000. And therefore, common man is in the center. So think about it. So what he really needs to focus is look at policing the adjournment. I remember he reading one of his judgment where he said that judicial independence and judicially scrutiny and judicially transparency, there's no contradiction between the two. So I would say that's an important part to look at it, policing adjournment, making sure that the state, which is the largest litigant, is a bona fide litigant and putting a lot of costs on them, building up the model like what you have, that justice clock in Gujarat, bringing better, I would say, grid system where all the pending cases and everything is monitored and bringing more accountability. I would say these are the things which is required. And if next 10 years, I would say the system can just collapse with just a volume of business and volume of litigation. And therefore, I think I like what Dr. Singhvi said, that Justice Chandrachud should think about a 5-10 year program, get next 2-3 judges thinking about it and understand where we are heading in 10 years. And therefore, the last thing anyone would like is that the Indian judiciary has collapsed just by the volume.
Thanks for that very detailed, in a sense, intervention that you made. And I'm going to take up some issues which you, in fact, said on this. But before that, I'll give you a small anecdote. One of these days when I met Dr. Singhvi and I read his board for the next day, he had 18 appearances to make. So then he was rushing from one.
So you can imagine 8 times of 18 appearances. Is it not humanly possible? And that's what we are heading towards.
Let me get on with the show, but because you mentioned, but anyways, Dr. Singhvi, I would like to ask you, many times, because you have this unique proposition, you're in parliament, you sit there, you wear the politicians' hat there and the lawmakers, and then you also argue in the Supreme Court. I want to ask you from that vantage, but politicians make statements that make in India and business can only succeed if courts deliver on enforceability of contracts, which is what Mr. Mohit Saraf also shared with us. From that point, do you think that Justice Chandrachud can bring in some changes? What could those changes be it infrastructure, world-class courtrooms, or on the commercial courts front? All of those things.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it, for the simple reason that, your exposure, your education, your training, your approach, and we've all known Justice Chandrachud in various capacities in that role as a youngster. They open up vistas, and he's aware of these things. Most important thing is being aware. He's aware of the meaning of time. We argued, I remember an international arbitration I did, where the argument about exceeding 1.5 minutes of the time allotted took more than 3 minutes. And everybody was heavily penalized for that 1.5 minutes excess. Now, I'm not saying that kind of system should be used in India, but I'm giving you an idea of being aware of that importance of time, importance of non-adjournments, as he says, not allowing, or the justice clock. Now, I think these are things everybody's in a sense aware, but your global outlook, your global exposure at the top universities teaches you how to inject to some extent degree there. Of course, all the rest of the three of us hearing Mohit speaking, despite all the compliments he was giving, we all, I think, our mouths were watering that perhaps we should change our system of fees. When the trillions of dollars he was talking about repeatedly should be ad valorem fees quoted, not the number of appearances, because he was talking only in trillions. And I lost track somewhere, and I'm sure some of my other colleagues share that sentiment. But now, coming back to Justice Chandrachud, you might have noticed other things about him. I remember from long years of practice here, perhaps the only young judge, baby judge, we used to joke at the bar, who took upon himself or got, or in a sense usurped because of his intellect, the right to write a judgment in constitution benches, in 3 judges, in 7 judges, despite being the youngest member, was Justice Jeevan Reddy at one time, because he was intellectually very alive, because he had some isms, but he would be the author in 7-judge bench where he was the junior most. And people would defer to him because he would already have written a judgment by the time arguments were 3/4 complete. Now, you will notice that in every major matter where there are large benches, the Justice Chandrachud has played a pivotal role, not now, but from when he entered the Supreme Court. You can start with the pre-Ayodhya, the privacy case, the Sabarimala case, and then, of course, Ayodhya, where the author is anonymous, but all of us have been pulling his leg now and then about the structure of the judgment, which gives away the author's name, and so on and so forth. So this is a compliment to his consensus building, his intellectual heft, the ability to go to the heart of the matter and produce a judgment while the matter is being argued. Because the draft circulation while the matter is being argued is a great ability of jurists. Of course, that is not final, it can be changed, but it shows that you are alive very much out there. Also, I think, he has this, as people say, that what makes you is, of course, not only talent, of which he has an abundance, but temperament. Talent and temperament go together, along with character and ideology. Now, his temperament is very good. His temperament, very diplomatic, but yet very firm. I cannot imagine a situation where he'll allow tensions to ratchet up and have a fracas in court, as is very easily possible in an explosive situation, because he has this very diplomatic temperament, but which is very firm, polite, but still, it doesn't create a very provocative atmosphere. And of course, the tests are yet to come. At the end of the day, in a constitutional court, there are lots of cross tensions. And the test comes when you have to stand up, and standing up sometimes in politically sensitive cases, in acrimonious disputes, in very surcharged atmosphere, is not easy. So those tests still have to come. And I have no doubt that he will pass them with flying colours, because he has to stand firm on certain principles in those very, very, although small in number, politically sensitive cases. But let me make a prediction. Yes, this is a very great period for him, but even after 24, and I think we can all discuss this, the best is yet to come will apply to him. The best is yet to come may apply, of course, from now, but the best is yet to come will apply even post-2024, because he has that combination of talents and temperament.
That's an interesting giveaway. Thank you for that comment. I'll go across to Senior Advocate Amit Desai. Now, Mr. Desai, you represent some of the top names of corporate India. Time is of essence when these disputes crop up. Could you share with us on that aspect? Can something be done to, in a sense, speed up disposal of matters? Do you think Justice Chandrachud now has enough time to leave a mark in that area, that this was achieved, this has been achieved? It's a Herculean task, but you see, even the government, many voices do come time and again that India could get more investments if the court system, the commercial courts could be speeded up, the court system could be speeded up. Your input on that?
So I think as Rohan rightly mentioned, I think he's destiny's child, and I like that term, destiny's child, because in the context and the place and time at which we are, Justice Chandrachud is the right man to bring about administrative reforms. His understanding of technology, his passion for introducing technology into the judicial system is at this moment extremely relevant to determine how to actually minimize the number of the backlog that exists in the system and to speed up the delivery on contractual disputes. And therefore, as you've been watching him, he's in charge of the E Committee of the Supreme Court, and he's making a very, very serious effort, not just as Manu said, in the context of senior counsels and making it a paperless court, but I think he's also going to push the envelope in relation to the high courts and the subordinate judiciary, because you can see his efforts to try and streamline the processes, push the NIC system in order to try and bring about a faster disposition of justice. So there is something very clearly in his mind, because as we've seen here, we all know about it, that he has the right temperament, he has the right intellect, he has the right vision. And in his legacy, one of the areas, apart from all the values that he would set out in the course of his judgments, I think he's conscious of the fact that there is a very serious need to actually expedite the justice delivery process. He's extremely conscious of that. And therefore, when it comes to written submissions, timely submissions, shorter submissions, no adjournments, I mean, a lot of that is all going to go towards this. I remember some years ago when I remember when Justice Nariman had just gone onto the bench, there was an effort made to actually segregate all the cases subject-wise within the registries and put them all together and bring them up in together and try and dispose them in one go. And that is something which I think will happen again. I think it also needs to happen at the level of the high courts. You will see some of that happening, as my sense as to where Justice Chandrachud will go. So I think he's very clear about some of these issues. He will put in his effort in that direction.
Thanks for that anecdote, that statement. I'll go across to Advocate Rohan Shah. Mr. Shah, that day I read your name that you were appearing in some 27,000 crore dispute. Now, anecdotally explain to me, when you're sitting across with the client and you're telling 15 days more, 15 days more, 15 days more, do you see the client's blood pressure going up with every extension in date? And if that is the case, what happens to his psychological mind, whether to invest more in a country? From that vantage point, when you are appearing in cases which have implications of thousands of crores, do you think that India needs a special kind of a system where wherever investment in India is committed, although I'm not saying you should be partial to, the layman wanting justice, but do you think that some attention could be paid for how high value cases can be disposed in a faster manner? Because it is these investments that generate jobs and drive the economy, and we all need jobs. Your input from that vantage point.
Undoubtedly, large or small, every matter which is not disposed of in a timely manner builds some amount of stress for the litigant, whether it's an individual or it's a large multinational corporation. And for large multinational corporations, I think one of their mysteries has been as to, how the court system in India sort of really works. And let me sort of crystallize, what this debate in terms of, speedy enforceability is. The Indian average till we get to enforceability is 1,430 odd days. At serial number 5, as compared to our 164, you have nations who are disposing of in 438 days. This bridge from 1430 to 438 would actually take us from 164 to the top 5, right? And it has aspects to it. And quite clearly, one situation is, the number of judicial appointments, which are vacancies, will need to be filled. The other situation is the ability to use technology both in the process of listing as also in the process of dissemination, because once a judgment is delivered by a Supreme Court or a High Court, the number of cases in the pipeline which can be disposed of, again, is something where technology can help. Certainly some sort of restraint on the time taken and the size of pleadings and argument. I think, these are changes which I'm sure the new Chief Justice will think very seriously about. The issue, again, is this situation directly correlated to investment? One part of this story is that, we are 1.4 billion consuming nation. Many people will invest irrespective. But I think a court system which universally is acknowledged as delivering justice, if that could be in a predictable time frame, I think it will create a further impetus to the one core issue we have, which to me is not investments, but is job creations. You have to create sort of 10 million jobs, and you're sort of going around creating probably 2. And that's really where I think in the phase that we have Justice Chandrachud as chief, I think a lot of attention will go. But I have also no doubt that issues of the common man and issues like your electoral bonds, electoral freebies, Article 370, places of worship, they will equally merit consideration and attention. So from my perspective, I think we will see hopefully an extremely balanced phase where economics and issues of liberty, equality, all will merit some equal level of consideration. And we will see, I would believe, some remarkable progress over the period of 2.5 years. And as Dr. Singhvi said, if this is then a roadmap where the baton passes and we walk this path for 5 to 10 years continually, I think there would be a sea change in the system.
Thanks for that input that you shared with all of the viewers. I'll go across to Mohit Saraf. Taking off from what Advocate Rohan Shah said, that disposal of cases from say 140 days to 430 days will take us from somewhere in the 120s to the top 5. If you could share with us, because you do these M&A deals where billions of dollars is involved. If I would recount, the last one was Vedanta and Foxconn, where you were involved. Do you think when you are putting in such large sums of money, the dispute resolution time is also taken into consideration? Things like enforceability of arbitral awards, those things also are on the mind of the promoter. If you could share with that aspect with us.
I would say today, if you look at all global corporations, when they come to invest in India, because of our low enforceability, and I would say the way the code grants injunction, their hurdle rate of investment in India is very high. That means they expect very high returns because the risk reward in India is very heavy. Because of that, if you think about this, the trickle down benefit to the common man gets very expensive. Our bridges are much more expensive. Our cost of power is much more expensive because global investors understand that for everything you have to litigate. Like we did a ArcelorMittal litigation for taking over the SR Steel. In spite of the court IBC law requirement 270 days, it took 540 days. So I would say these are very important. It adds to the cost of capital. It adds to the hurdle rate. But I think what is really important is this is a known fact that in a country where there is, in OECD countries, the first level of jurisdiction, first level of dispute gets solved in 100 days, and India, it takes 450 days. So if you compare that issue, then if this can be improved, and one of the way to improve, and I think we've all heard what his capabilities are, his intellectual capacity, rewriting, history, legacy. I would say one important issue, which I remember reading one thing once he was giving a lecture at IIT and I was there. And what I heard about him, that the role of a judge is to set out a ground rule for future work. So he said basically that you basically set ground rules for future reform. And I remember that particular judgment, the Puttaswamy case, where he virtually went against the judgment of his father. And he said that the constitution provisions needs to be not interpreted very narrowly, but broadly. I would say if you look at these two thought process, which Justice Chandrachud had, I would say it will be very appropriate at this stage to think about that quicker and speedier disposable of adjudication for case should somehow be brought as like a fundamental right. And I would say what it will do is it will force the state government, the government, to appoint judges, build infrastructure, and then the judiciary can do what they can do well. So I would say to something, it will be very important. And I think that the 5-year plan should be something towards that, said that all the cases get resolved much quicker and only and there is a very high cost if you litigate frivolously.
Point well taken. And I'll go across to Dr. Singhvi. Dr. Singhvi, you would hold the distinction of being the only advocate who argued matters on his iPad during COVID. You had COVID, but you argued matters. And you did not miss your brief. You did not miss your appearance. And that is why I would want to ask you this. From the point of delivering to the client, because he needs to carry on with his business, what do you think the Supreme Court do as far as e-courts are concerned? These days, clients do want to watch the proceedings. They don't want to travel. If they could watch it from Bombay, while and also for someone like you, if you're appearing in 4 forums in one day, you're going to Delhi High Court, Supreme Court, and a tribunal. Do you think the e-court really will help? If at the Supreme Court level, we have a very robust e-court system. You have any expectations on that front?
As far as expectation is concerned, I have unequivocal expectation. Some like it, some don't like it, that Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud will push to the farthest the limits of general digitization. I'm not in the judiciary. I have no doubt about it. You've done programs with this earlier, so let me digress just for 30 seconds. There is a illogical and somewhat irrational angst in various sections of the bar against the availability of virtual hearing. Let's be very frank about it. You can't put your finger on it. You can't give a reason. It could be on grounds of elitism. It could be on grounds of monopolization. It could be on grounds of access to so-called elitist lawyers. But it is actually from within the bar and from large sectors of the judiciary that this angst comes. You have a lot of high courts, not now, even when COVID was at its peak, including Bombay for a long time, which has not had a hybrid option. Forget virtual exclusively, but not even a hybrid option. There are many other high courts, including in the Far East, Amravati is another one, which has no hybrid option today. More than 2, more than 5. Now, it is not for nothing, a little noticed fact, that notice was issued on a petition only to those high courts who do not provide even a hybrid option by a bench headed by none other than Justice Chandrachud. And a lot of those high courts are now scrambling to make that available, something which need not have needed APIL. So Justice Chandrachud has to not merely, look at these sentiments as you and I are expressing that, yes, there should be digitization. He has to also meet that angst. He has to deal with this. It comes from bar associations. It comes from political considerations. It comes from misinformed debate. It comes from general angst. But it is something which he has to factor in. That's as far as that is concerned. The issue of administration of justice and reforms there have been discussed by many speakers in today's program. But let me tell you, the other thing Justice Chandrachud will have to face is that at the end of the day, of course, it's a very large issue, and I've been writing on this for the last 20 years. It's my favorite topic. It's an issue of technology, of availability, of manpower, of infrastructure, all of that. But at the end of the day, you cannot ignore the fact that the single largest reasons, if you were to force the single largest reason, is lack of judges. Roughly 4,000 to 5,000 vacancies in the lowest judiciary. And in a country of this size, only 1,100 high court judges in all the high courts. At all times since independence, 300 to 400 of those seats being vacant. Now, these two facts add to that a third fact, that judges, this is the only country where judges procreate themselves. Judges appoint judges. So really the direct blame comes to the judiciary that if you have 300 vacancies for 75 years at any time in the high court of 1,100 high court judges all across the country, then you are to blame. And therefore you take the flak. So something Justice Chandrachud, with a mix of his diplomacy and his firmness, will have to set that right. Simple things like being at some point of time judicially very strict about a second referral back. A large number of names are held back because there is an unconstitutional second referral back by the executive, which is impermissible under 2 7-judge bench judgments. But nobody has bailed the cat there. A bench technically should, I believe, now the time has come, issue a notice of contempt, if not to the minister, at least to the law secretary, that, look, how can you hold back this name up for a second referral from the courts? Now, these are tough decisions. Without this, ultimately, the heart and soul of the arrears problem cannot be solved, because it's not the Supreme Court which has a major arrears problem. It's the 2.5 crores staggering in the lowest level. By the way, now, another very sad fact, the total arrears of 3 crores plus has increased to 4.25 crores because of COVID in the last 2.5, 3 years. So we used to cite 3 to 3.25 as the total arrears in the 3 levels, of which about 70 lakhs was in the High Court, and the balance was 2 crores or 1.5 crores in the lowest courts. Now the total has become 4 crores, and the worst sufferers are the lowest courts. COVID is cited as the reason. So, he has to attack that at the base of the pyramid, not in the Supreme Court alone. He has to provide that leadership.
Thank you for that detailed, in a sense, intervention. I'll go to senior advocate Amit Desai. Mr. Desai, many times when I end up calling you, you're in the Supreme Court catching a flight to Bombay because you have an appearance there. Now, when you have to do this to and fro, do you think pushing the digital court system would help even clients? Because somebody like you has to come from Supreme Court, again Bombay High Court, again you go to Supreme Court. Do you think at the Supreme Court level, we should have a very robust digital court ecosystem? And if you need 5,000 crores or 6,000 crores, be it, let's have the best system that the world can offer so that investors get confidence. Your views on that?
So Tarun, I think we all know that access to justice is a fundamental right. The question really is that, is digitalization and access to court hearings through the video conferencing route, be it entirely 100% video conferencing or hybrid, isn't that a facet of access to justice for every litigant? And it's really the question for the courts to consider. That I think for a long time, there has been a conversation that the cost of litigation for coming into the Supreme Court is extremely high. For people coming in from Kerala, Kanyakumari, all the way to Delhi to litigate is extremely high. So there is no doubt in my mind that it's not just about, as Dr. Singhvi says, elitist lawyers. But I think when you look at it from the litigant's point of view, it's today very, very easy to provide the infrastructure for access into the Supreme Court. And it's very easy for a litigant to have a lawyer of his choice. And you have lawyers across the length and breadth of India who are in a position to come into the Supreme Court and argue, and COVID has actually demonstrated that. So when we look at it from that perspective, there is a cost perspective, there's an access to justice perspective. And there is majority, and I always had the number 3.2 crores in my mind till Manu has just clarified that the latest numbers are 4.25 crores. And out of that, 70 lakh are in the high courts. Now, you talk about not just the Supreme Court, but even at the high court level. If you have this access, then I don't see why high courts cannot give. We have the technology, we have the expertise, we have the financial capabilities. It's not very difficult. I remember in the midst of COVID, and this is something which we are not in a position to understand as to what really is the concern of the justice delivery system, whether it's the judges or whether it's a bar association or the political considerations. But I do know that, for example, in the Bombay Bar Association, there was a conversation when some of these issues came up, and the court was actually considering moving into physical, saying that there is actually lack of infrastructure for the younger lawyers to come in and access the justice system through the video conferencing route. There were a lot of seniors who were ready to actually provide access to computers, donate computers to the bar associations, and so to facilitate the youngsters from actually accessing the system. But for some reason, which I don't think I'm in a position to really understand, that was not accepted. So, you're absolutely right. I think it is imperative that we have, in fact, I must tell you, I am a changed person. In the initial days of COVID, I thought that the digital means will not be appropriate, will not give you a good justice delivery system. But I have seen the effects. I have seen the impact. I have myself evolved and changed to see that, yes, we are able to see a significant justice delivery through the means of video conferencing. We've argued so many cases, very complex cases in the Supreme Court through this means. So it doesn't compromise justice in that sense. And there is a crying need to actually provide for this digital route.
Point well taken. I think in many important cases, we've seen lawyers appearing from London on their computer and arguing before the Supreme Court. So not that can't happen. Even if you're abroad, it does happen.
But it's a facet of the fundamental right now.
Now we are running out of time. So we will weave in our comment with a quick final comment, wishing Justice Chandrachud well and ending the show on that happy note. I'll start with Advocate Rohan Shah. And my question to you would be that I remember many times you appear in the Delhi High Court, then rush to Karnataka, Bombay, then to the Supreme Court. Do you think this digitalization, if pushed, could also help lawyers running from one city to the other? Maybe you can do one city, but you can't be in 3-4 cities in a matter of 2 days. It's also saving time. So also the client's money. Do you think on that front a lot needs to be done, and Justice Chandrachud would be the right person to do it because of the kind of the length of tenure he has and also his own interest in the e-court system? And also your final comment with it, but very quickly.
Yeah. So I think without a doubt, all of us having experienced the e-court system, the ability to do hearings electronically through the COVID, realize the great merits of the process, both for the litigant and also for the legal community. And I think it is important that this is not something which is only centric to the Supreme Court or the High Courts. I think it's critical that it is something which is available even at the lower courts and throughout the judicial system. Yes, there will be some amount of resistance, there will be some amount of objection, but over a period of time, I'm sure with somebody like Justice Chandrachud at the helm, we will overcome these and we will integrate this into the system. And I've heard Justice Chandrachud say that, to his mind, technology is adjunct to rule of law and it is inherent to the delivery of justice to all citizens. And, just as a final comment, we all realize the enormity and the diversity of issues that the next Chief Justice of India will face and future Chief Justice will face. And, taking a cricketing analogy, people always ask, who would you have batting for you if your life depended on it? And I think if I convert that analogy to the law, I'd rather have Justice Chandrachud in the saddle than anyone else that I know. And I do hope that, the many, many aspirations and hopes that everybody has will be addressed with certain deftness and certain effectiveness that we all know it can bring to this.
Thanks. And final comment, Mr. Mohit Saraf, from your side.
I would say if you look at, Tarun, the physical infrastructure in India, that's a poor quality. But I think the data connectivity has significantly improved, I think even productivity level of common man. Same thing would happen actually if you see the access to justice, which is a fundamental right. The same thing will go if actually the entire aspect of e-court is actually put a lot of, I think, video conferencing and data connectivity and appearances, e-filing. All these things clearly will improve the access to justice. And I would say this is clearly, we believe that he's so focused himself on technology and access, he will do that. And I would say I think the various reservation of bar and all, I think that he need to find a diplomatic solution so that at least this becomes a reality for litigant. I don't know about the other stakeholders, and at least litigant, and they should have full access. They should be able to participate without traveling.
But good point. I'll go to Senior Advocate Amit Desai, and Dr. Singhvi will then close. Senior Advocate Amit Desai, your final comment on Justice Chandrachud.
I think Justice Chandrachud is one of those judges who understands the social ethos, he understands the constitutional ethos. And his ability to marry the two is something that is been seen by all of us. I think the next 2 years, I predict that out of most of those 488 matters which are pending before the Constitution bench will be taken up and dealt with and disposed of. And I think there are many more, which are 7 judges and 9 judges and 13 judges. And I would think that Justice Chandrachud would use this opportunity to deal with those kind of issues that are pending before those benches, and then set the tone for the next 100 years, 2047, as we say, in the 100th year of India. So I think that is very clearly there in his mind. He has the opportunity, and I'm sure with all his values that we've talked about, we will see a lot of positive for the nation.
Thank you. Dr. Singhvi, 2 children started from the same school. One became the king of the bar, the other becomes the Chief Justice of India. So what would be your final comment on Justice Chandrachud?
Well, I think we've all said a lot of facets. I think at the end of the day, as far as the Chief Justice tenure is concerned, he will have to ask the question that what is it the one thing which can leave the bar a significant better place, the system a significantly better place than he found it. And that's going to be a tough one with all his talents. He'll do well in many areas, but at the end of the day, unless he can somehow slash, and there are at least 10, 12 ways of doing it, this ridiculous, gigantic, because look, see, we are a country with the most finest minds. Our judges and lawyers are ahead of most other countries. We've seen it all. And we are the envious inventors. Everybody envies us for doctrines which are very dynamic, like PIL, basic structure, people copy us and things like that. But when we had to hang our head in shame is one areas. So Justice Chandrachud, if we can slash this 4.5 crore figure to something like 2 crores, that is something which is the biggest challenge. And I think he is aware of that. I hope he addresses that. It is not that large and not so difficult as it sounds. Many of these are just numbers. They collapse like a pack of cards. But he needs that institutional leadership at the top. And he needs that constant push in a nitty-gritty sense. And if one person can do it, it is him, no one else.
Thank you. So here was this, a bunch of 4 fine minds, each at the top of his profession in a way, joining on this show, welcoming Justice Chandrachud, who's going to take over as the Chief Justice of India on the 9th of November. Of course, I will request the indulgence of all my 4 panelists time and again on the judgments he delivers, on the utterances that he will make time and again through his speeches. We know he's a vocal judge. He speaks his mind. And whenever there is a platform where he speaks, he definitely has a lot of food for thought that he gives us. There is a lot that he conveys, and we will like to take that up as and when that happens after he takes the mantle of the Chief Justice of India. We wish him well, but I would like to thank Dr. Abhishek Singhvi, Senior Advocate Amit Desai, Advocate Rohan Shah, Mohit Saraf, Managing Partner of Saraf and Partners, for making time for this important issue. And thank you so much, viewers, for tuning in. Thank you so very much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.